The men's team was not the only one to find out their tournament fate on Saturday, as the women's selection Sunday show took place a little later on in the evening on Sunday night. The Hoosiers, to no one's surprise, the number 2 overall seed in the tournament, the program's first number 1 seed. They're in the Greenville 2 region, The women's tournament, much different than the men's. The men's have 4 different locations. The women's this year have only two. Two of the brackets go to Greenville. The other 2 go to Washington, I believe Seattle. So the Hoosiers will be in Greenville with South Carolina. First off, you want South Carolina on the opposite side of the bracket because that means you don't play them into the title game, which is way down the road, but IU's good enough to kind of look ahead to those types of things. Let's look at their matchup in the first round. They don't officially know their matchup yet because they will play the winner of playing game between Tennessee Tech and Monmouth. That game will obviously be in Bloomington in Assembly Hall, as will the second round game. If the Hoosiers avoid that 16-1 upset, they will play Oklahoma State or Miami. That's your first intriguing storyline and probably the biggest storyline of the first round. Yarden Garzon has been fantastic for the Hoosiers season. Her older sister plays for Oklahoma State. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, but her older sister is on the team. So root for Oklahoma State so the 2 sisters get to play one another. I think that would be a really, really fun story. So obviously that is the biggest storyline of kind of the first couple of games. If you look at if the Hoosiers get out of the first 2 rounds into the Sweet 16, their most likely opponent is going to be Villanova, who you may not know. Maddy Siegrist is as good as anyone in the country. She's a first-team All-American, a high volume scorer. She dropped 50 points this season on Seton Hall, I believe. So in terms of just individual players, as good as anyone's going to play this year, and that's including Caitlin Clark. So they'll have their hands full in that regard. That being said, as good as she is, they're a 4 seed for a reason. They have 6 losses on the season, but 3 of them were to UConn. IU knows history about playing against UConn, so they can sympathize with them on that one. But still, that will be an interesting matchup at the very least. IU's done well. Chloe Moore-McNeil, Sydney Parrish, Garzon all would have their hands full with that matchup. But, I mean, you've seen what they've been able to do against Caitlin Clark, so I have confidence, but Siegrist is a first-team All-American. She's going to get hers in some regard. Hoosiers just kind of have to limit that. If you look at the other half, the bottom half of the bracket, Michigan is in this bracket, but as a 6 seed. LSU, who went a good chunk of the season undefeated and were ahead of IU in the polls for a good chunk of the season, is the 3 seed. They only have 2 losses. One of them's to South Carolina, and one of them was in the SEC tournament before they even got to South Carolina. But the SEC is really bad. Outside of South Carolina and LSU, it's a really bad conference. So LSU may only have 2 losses, but their resume just doesn't really stack up with everyone else. Maybe a little surprising they're a 3 seed. For most of the season, they were a 2 seed. So that I would say that loss in the SEC tournament probably hurt them a little bit. Ultimately, even if they're underseeded, with regards to IU, it doesn't really matter because they only have to play 1 team out of that part of the bracket. NC State, the Hoosiers have some history with, beat them in the tournament a couple of years ago, have played them in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, but they are a 7 seed against Princeton. And then Utah is your 2 seed in this one out of the Pac-12. So the biggest things IU wanted to avoid was obviously they weren't going to play South Carolina. This is just kind of generally speaking. They wanted to avoid South Carolina. Stanford's really good, might be another 2 seed, might be a 1 seed. So avoiding them is big. UConn, if UConn gets healthy, it's a big if, but if UConn gets healthy, they're as good as anyone in the country. So you avoid UConn. Maryland is playing as well as anybody. I don't think they were going to put them in IU's bracket, but with Maryland and Iowa as potential kind of 1-2 seeds, they may have been forced to. So you avoid Maryland as well. Iowa, obviously. And then Notre Dame is also really good. They also have a very pivotal injury. So basically, all of those are not in your bracket. You do not have to deal with them. And I think that's the most important takeaway from this one. Indiana was the number 2 overall seed, and they were treated like the number 2 overall seed. So the committee got it right. There was maybe some concern that they would fall off the 1 seed line or maybe not be. Let me rephrase that. They were never not going to be a 1 seed. It was just, were they going to be the number 2 overall seed? Because South Carolina had the number 1 overall seed locked up. Were the Hoosiers, their 2 losses in the final 3 games, was that going to set them back? The answer ultimately is no. We don't have, as I'm recording this, the date of when they will play yet, but Seth Tao, who's been on the show before, friend of the show, now does just kind of some general sports coverage for the Hoosiers. He said that they will not play the men and women on the same day. I haven't seen a schedule yet. I'll take him at his word for that. We can clarify that later on in the week, but I mean, the men's team is going to play at 10 o'clock at night, so I don't think the women are going to play in Bloomington at 10 o'clock at night, so the games won't overlap in that regard. But as long as they don't overlap in the first weekend, it's going to be a weekend chock full of IU basketball, NCAA tournament competition. Awesome. Excited for it. Best time of the year. Be sure you guys are followed along with us, whether on Twitter, whether on YouTube, whether on whatever podcast feed you listen to, whether it's Apple, whether it is Overcast, Spotify, whatever it may be. Be sure you're subscribed. Leave a rating there. We'll be back throughout this week, continue to give you coverage of the upcoming games. We're going to talk plenty of women's basketball, plenty of Kent State, plenty of IU's bracket as well. So be sure, again, you are subscribed. Thank you for making us your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball. We talked about them. They are, I mean, there's no better time to be listening to college basketball content. So Isaac Shade, Andy Patton are going to have everything you guys could want. The whole college basketball network is chipping in, helping out. So be sure you guys are subscribed to that and make that your second listen today. Again, be sure you are following us on Twitter. It's going to be a fun week. It's the best time of year. Let's enjoy it all together. Have a great start to your week, guys. Most importantly, and as always, though, LEO.